You're listening to the Mindset School podcast, episode 15. Today on the Mindset School podcast, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Christy Walter about depression. So if you need to hear about depression, hang tight. We've got more for you. Hey friends, welcome to the Mindset School podcast with Peggy Easterling, where we learn to smile authentically from the inside out. Dr. Christy Walter is a board-certified emergency medicine physician that holds a master's degree in counseling psychology. She's a former therapist. She has been practicing medicine for over 20 years. She created a curriculum that borrows from her personal and professional life experiences and her struggles with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And she founded Doggone Depression and helps people struggling with mental health challenges to develop skills to create a life filled with hope, healing, happiness, and freedom. So today we have the privilege of not only welcoming Dr. Christy, but we take a sneak peek behind the scenes into the Mindset School, where we meet up with Dr. Christy as she is talking with members in the Mindset School community. If you struggle with mental health, listen in and listen closely to the tools that we use in order to get on the other side of depression. All right. So if you don't know Dr. Christy, she is amazing. She has so much to offer us. And she today is going to share a presentation. She is a physician on staff. I'm sure she might tell us just a little touch about herself as well. But I'm thrilled that she's here. She has so much wisdom and experience in the field of mindset, in the field of psychology. And I hope you have your questions ready, because after her presentation, she's going to allow us to pick her brain and share so much with us today. It's an honor and a privilege. Dr. Christy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Peggy. Really appreciate it. Very glad to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me onto your program, and I hope I can impart some words of wisdom. A lot of my material comes from Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is a neuropsychologist, scientist, and one of the things that she says is that you can use your mind to change your brain, and as your brain changes, it'll change your mind. So just a little thought to ponder there. But our mindset matters. How we operate in the world is largely guided by our mindset and the way we think. And as Henry Ford would say, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And the book of Proverbs says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, or so he is. But I want to say that it goes beyond just our thoughts. I think that our thoughts and feelings are a result of what our core beliefs are. The things that we've internalized, perhaps from childhood, perhaps from trauma we've experienced or life experiences. We've internalized belief systems about ourselves, about the people around us, about the world in general. And those beliefs then affect the way we think, the way we see things, the way we feel about things. And those thoughts and those feelings will then directly influence the way we behave, how we operate in the world. And over time, those behaviors become habits. And as we habitually operate in the world, we'll receive feedback, whether positive or negative, that often reinforce those habits or beliefs. For example, if you believe that life is unfair and that, the man is out to get you, at work, and that there's no hope of advancement, you're going to bring into your into your daily routine thoughts and feelings and behaviors that reflect that belief system. You might not set your alarm to get up in time for work, and so you're constantly late. Or perhaps, you speak negatively about your coworkers or your boss. And so when time for promotion comes around and you're passed over, you think, oh, see, that reinforces my belief system. But the reality is your belief system caused your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, and then you got the result, which was not to get the promotion. And I want to say that the brain is like a computer. It takes input in, and what we put in is what we're going to get out. So garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out. But the problem is many of us have faulty templates, the templates that hold our beliefs, and those faulty templates produce faulty thoughts, faulty emotions, behaviors, and habits. And the interesting thing is that we all have a confirmation bias. So our faulty template will seek to reinforce itself. And if you've ever gotten a new car, say you bought a red Honda, suddenly you're going to notice everything around you, all these red cars and all these Honda cars that you didn't notice before. It's not that they weren't there. It's just that you weren't primed to pick them out until you yourself got a red car. And we hold the same kind of confirmation bias. We will see and interpret things based on what our internal template tells us. And we will tend to reinforce that and maybe not see altering opinions, altering realities. Maybe you tend towards negativity, and so you're not going to see the positive as easily. But like I said in the beginning, we could use our mind to change our brain. And this is really key. And the Bible even talks about renewing our mind, because God recognized that we were going to need to work on our template. And the good news is that you might have a faulty template, but those neural pathways are not in concrete. They are flexible, and you can have new neural pathways develop with. That's known as neuroplasticity. And so as you input new data, new thought patterns, new belief systems, you will begin to change the template of your brain. And then that's going to change how you think, how you feel, how you operate. Better habits then will develop, and then you'll develop better outcomes. I myself tended to have a very negative way of seeing the world. I operated out of a victim mindset. I had been abused as a child, and everything was kind of threatening to me. I saw the world as an unsafe place. And I reinforced that with a lot of the choices I made in friendships, for example, relationships that were life draining and not life affirming, because it went back to my belief system that that things were unsafe, that I was a victim. And so I unknowingly, created scenarios that could reinforce that, yeah, I'm a victim. Look at these bad things that happened to me and continue to happen to me. And that's it in terms of the slides. But I want to expand a little bit on the idea that what we bring into our adult life, what we bring into our daily life, can need some major overhauls. I didn't know I was operating out of a victim mindset. I knew that life wasn't working. I knew that I was struggling deeply with depression and anxiety. But I didn't know how to change my brain. I went to counseling. I did all the things that, I thought you were supposed to do. I went as far as to get a master's degree in psychology so I could fix myself, because I struggled with depression for decades. And I got out of college and I thought, I'm not ready to go to medical school, but let me fix myself. So I went and got a psychology degree, and I gained all this insight. Yeah, you were abused as a kid, and so that has affected the way you live your life and blah, blah, blah. But all the insight in the world wasn't enough to help me pivot. I didn't know how to actually change the structure of my brain until divine intervention and trial and error. I found tools, and I pulled from tools that I had learned, and a life coach who I worked with. And I developed the program that I now have as a result of the best of what I've ever learned clinically and personally. And it was a process, but once you have the keys, it's much easier to work on changing the brain and to pivot.
That was so good, Dr. Christy. The depth of the core beliefs that we have and that neuroplasticity, I explain it. It goes so good with the name of what you offer. You offer a membership called Doggone Depression. And whenever I talk about our pathways that we create in our brains, I call it a dog trail because I grew up in the country and I talk kind of funny. But so when we have that dog trail, that dog goes right to that spot that he's always used to go and to, especially if there's a threat. He's at that fence and he's going on that dog trail. And that's what our brains do. They go to that dog trail and it takes the grass away. It's so easy to go that same path. I love how you explained it though, that it's even a little deeper root than just our thoughts. It's our core beliefs. That was so good.
That's why behavior modification doesn't work in the long run. I mean, you might have some short-term shift, but behavior modification in and of itself is not getting at the root, which is the belief system, the template that you're operating out of.
Yeah, I think of like when you're going through behavior modification, you're always looking back and you're always looking at the past rather than mapping out those new pathways and taking action to them. And I think of it like, hey, don't think of an elephant. Don't think of it wearing a pink tutu. Don't think of its wrinkles. Don't think of its gray, long trunk. Don't think of its big feet. And when you're only looking at the elephant and talking about the elephant, it's hard to look at anything else.
Exactly. And it reinforces that negative path, those negative pathways. I know that for me, therapy seemed to always want to stay in the problem, talk about the issue or the issues or the trauma. And I remember one day, just kind of like the light bulb went off and I asked my counselor, I'm like, how many times do I need to tell my story in order to move forward? You can't move forward from a story that you keep telling. And so I needed to develop tools, and it doesn't have to be rocket science, tools to start changing the narrative. And so literally I started reading affirmations out loud to myself every morning. I am more than a conqueror. I am the righteousness of God through Christ Jesus. I am smart. I am powerful. And I didn't believe a lot of it at first, but I kept making myself say it. And I created a picture of what I wanted my future to look like. And I wrote about what my future looks like in a healthy state. And I read that picture to myself every day, really trying to flesh out the senses, what it feels like to be an author. For example, I wrote, I am an author. I'm a successful author. I own my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. And none of this was a reality when I started. But I read my affirmations and my vision of my future successful self to myself every single day. And it takes 60 days to create a new neural pathway. So saying it a couple of times or having a Post-it note on your mirror isn't enough. You have to do it repetitively. And it takes 60 days to create a new pathway. And that's a baby pathway at first. And so it needs to continually be reinforced till it becomes the new reality that you operate out of. And I'm happy to say that probably 50% of what's on my future successful self note card is now true. I am an author. I am published. I created my course. I'm operating out of a place of victory. I no longer operate out of a place of victimhood. But it took changing the brain in order for my mind to change, my thoughts to change, my actions to change. That's just one example of something that I did, but it's very easy. It's doable as day one,
And you've changed so much. Even in the short time that I've known you, I've watched your entrepreneur journey, and you were going through some personal things, and yet you still plowed the path. There was circumstance didn't go away, that there were circumstances occurring, yet you didn't let that get in the way of what you wanted in life. Do you mind talking and sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So the personal circumstance Peggy's referring to is while I was creating Doggone Depression course content, I was going through a divorce. I had gotten to a place where freedom was the most valuable thing that I wanted. And what that meant to me was no debt, no guilt, more time. And so I started making my actions align with my desire of freedom. And so I made inroads to pay off my student loan. And the guilt part, I stayed in a very unhealthy marriage out of guilt for a long time. And I finally got to the point where it was no longer going to let guilt run the show. So I did. I left. I filed, and it took 2 years to come to a conclusion. But during that time, instead of dwelling in the years of frustration, being sidelined by the fact that he wanted a lot monetarily from me, I kept doing my affirmations. I kept doing my future successful self, and I kept making steps in the direction of my future, as opposed to being a victim of what was going on in the present or of my past. And it was a very conscious decision to operate in that mode, because none of it had come to pass yet. I was still in the process of divorce. I was, still struggling with depression and anxiety. I didn't have my course done. I didn't even know how to do an online course, but I knew that I wanted to make my struggle, my test into a testimony to help other people. And that was what I focused on.
Do you feel like since you had something to take physical action towards, that it helped you through that season even more? Just the taking action piece, and not to distract you, because you have to grab those thoughts and process the thoughts of what you're dealing with and what you're going. You can't just shove all of that down. You've got to process those. But do you feel like that having that helped you through that season even better?
It helped, but I have to say, kind of backing up a little bit, I didn't go from moving to Florida to doing my program. I was in such a broken, fragile state that all I could do was give myself permission to do the next right thing. And at first, that meant coming out of the emergency department, doing telemedicine just to support myself and to take away some of the stressors of work. And also, I just started doing drawing. I had no idea I had any artistic ability, but all I could do was work my telemedicine shifts and do one positive thing. And what that one positive thing was to pick up a pencil and sketch my dog. And it was something that helped center me. I developed my affirmations. And so the most I could do the first several months, was do some drawing, read my affirmations, work my telemedicine shift, and start all over. My stamina was very limited, and still to today, I have to acknowledge my limitations. Come 3:00 in the afternoon, I start to lose momentum. And so instead of pushing myself into a state of frustration or, self-deprecation, I give myself permission to stop. So it was a process. And then when I found the purpose of it all, which was the program, yes, moving in that direction definitely helped. The momentum of that carried me from that point on. But it took little steps to get there, and repetitive steps.
And playing sometimes that role to all the way to the end will keep us from taking that next step, because it can feel overwhelming when we play. But looking at that very next step, often for a lot of people, that very next step is to step away and to find something that makes them feel valued. And for you, it was your art. And
Right.
if you wouldn't have taken that first step of of letting yourself mentally kind of escape and not to escape from where you're at, but to take intent in your reality. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to invest in my mental health. And this means I'm going to explore this art thing. It's something that I'm going to try. If you wouldn't have taken that step, what would your business be where you are? Like, is so many people's first step that they're not allowing themselves to take, keeping them from their end goal?
Yeah, there'd be no business because the act of doing the art and seeing some benefit in doing the art, doing the affirmations, doing the future successful self, and other things that I had incorporated, and starting to see a shift, I was like, I'm onto something here. I can use what I'm learning to help other people. And so had I not started just with that simple piece of doing the art and giving myself permission to not be running a million miles an hour all the time, and to just step back and to self-reflect and to give myself permission to do less, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have created the program. In fact, the dog portraits themselves became the mascot, if you will, for my program, so much so that I call it Doggone Depression. I created a logo with a little dog holding up a sign that says Doggone Depression, and I've incorporated into each of my lessons a dog portrait that can be downloaded and printed. And part of the process is to bring some levity to the program and do some artwork. So that art piece led to a part of what's in the program and the whole dog thing.
That's beautiful. I love it. And there's not a better name, Doggone Depression. That's how we all feel about it.
I spent 30 plus years in therapy talking about the problem and never really got into the solution. I mean, yeah, I had insight, but a lot of good that did me until I came to learn about the power of neuroplasticity and new belief systems, new templates change everything, so much so that I've incorporated some of that idea and a little bit of EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing ideas, into a process to process through trauma. And I've walked people through it, and we go from a highly charged traumatic event to neutral in less than an hour.
Wow.
How many years of therapy I spent trying to do that, never got there. We needed to be working backwards from belief systems on down. I was at the height of my career success, all the bells and whistles, a Christian, a believer. And, I would quote Bible verses at myself, think about what is good, pure, and lovely. And all it did was make me feel more shame because I couldn't get there. It's like, how come I can't get there? I have everything that I could possibly have wanted. I love the Lord, but I didn't know how to pivot. A lot of that fatigue stems also from just a little addition here, adrenal fatigue. When we're exposed to constant states of stress, and who isn't, living in our society, our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is always in stress response mode. And so you're producing adrenaline, epinephrine, your cortisol levels are spiking, and then the cortisol levels become relatively depleted. And with that depletion comes brain fog, comes chronic fatigue, comes chronic illness, comes all sorts of, physical ailments in addition to the mental drain. And so you need to learn how to allow our adrenal system to restore and be recuperate so that the physical part can catch up as well. So I do believe, and it is in my program, processing the trauma. I don't agree with the way it's done in mental health.
Okay.
Today. I feel that oftentimes it's re-traumatizing, especially when you're retelling the story and kind of reliving it. I mean, you could, end up having PTSD all over again as a result. And I think it is important to process in the sense that, for example, the way I have structured it is I give space to face it, whatever the trauma was, to trace its emotional impact. So what emotions have you taken from it? Face, trace, embrace how it's affected your life. You know, the choices you've made, the way it's impacted you emotionally, physically, spiritually. Face, trace, erase, embrace those things, but then replace with truth. So part of the replacement is identifying the lies that you took away as a result of the trauma, the abuse. What lies do you believe? How did it impact the way you are in life? And then to reframe it, to reprogram the mind, to bring it back to the reprogramming part with what does the Word of God say about you? And what is the truth? Who is your authentic self? The authentic self is not the person who was traumatized. And so I like to do that, processing the trauma in a very contained way so that you don't get swept in the event of it. The discovery of how it's impacted your way of being and the lies you've taken away. Because when you can identify the lies, you can replace it with truth. That's where I think processing the trauma is useful, not just in telling the story and retelling the story and reliving the story. The cool thing about coaching is it's very different than therapy. Therapy seems, my experience is you go in, you talk about all the negative issues. Maybe you get a few tools or suggestions, but it's largely hands off. Coaching, your hands on. You know, you get in there and you say, hey, look, this is a lie you're believing. Let's flip the script, you know. And so I actually think it's more beneficial, at least it has been for me, than traditional therapy. There is a place for traditional therapy. I'm not saying there isn't. I just like the coaching approach better. You may be lacking are some of the practical action steps. You have the knowledge, but now we need to have some practical baby action steps. You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And so I pretended, because I was in a dark, deep, dark place. I was still very much depressed, you know, struggle with suicidal depression. And I pretended, what if I wasn't depressed? What would life look like if I wasn't depressed? Like, I can't see me not depressed, but if I could imagine and use my imagination to create something wild, something I don't even think is possible, that's how I did it. Like, I don't think any of this is possible, but if it was possible, this would be really cool if it could look like this. And the repetitive, I mean, it took a good 3 months to shift. Every day I do my affirmations and I read my future successful self and I'd be like, this is so stupid, you know? And I also pre-started with a brain dump because I would wake up depressed and anxious, mind racing in a black hole every day. And so I do a 2-minute brain dump, and I still do this, a 2-minute brain dump where I dump the crap, you know, all the negative, you know, this is not going to work. I can't believe I'm doing this. It's such a waste of time. You know, I got so much to do and I can't get out of my own way. Life is never going to change. Whatever crazy was going on in my head. And then I stopped at 2 minutes and I said, okay, what am I feeling? Because a lot of it is not even being so detached from yourself, you don't even have any idea what you feel, right? Or you're trying to avoid feeling something. So I go, okay, how am I feeling? And I go depressed. I'm feeling depressed. And every day I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. And then I ask myself, what would you prefer to feel? And I would prefer to feel calm or joy or anything but depressed or anxious. But I would pick a specific thing. And so if I woke up on a particular day depressed, how would I prefer to feel? Light. And I pick one action to take me in that direction. So one thing I could do to feel a little bit lighter, walk around the block, go outside and feel the sun, walk to the beach. One action. And then I'd read my affirmations right on top of that. And then throughout the course of the day, when I'd start drifting back into the hopelessness and the depression, I'd be like, what was my intent for today? Oh yeah, it was to feel lightness and light. What's an action step I can take? I could go for another walk. I could pull out my crayons. I can read my affirmations and my future self. And I had to do it religiously because the depression was so bad. The despair was so bad. The suicidal thoughts were so bad. And I didn't notice any change until I hit that 3-month mark. And then things started to shift. So maybe part of what you're experiencing is you just haven't done some of it long enough. You know, the actual physical brain hasn't had a chance to change. And you're defaulting back to what the template is currently. So it's okay that you feel awful. And at the same time you feel awful, you can still be recording your template. There was a period of time, and not too long ago, I was convinced that I would suicide, that it was just a matter of time, that it was inevitable. And I can happily say that's like the farthest thing from my mind now. As I was doing the art and practicing some of the skills and could quiet myself down enough for direction, I felt like God put it in my heart that this is the path I want you on, just because I was in a place of more peace and less chatter in my brain, that I felt for the first time a real connection with the Lord. I mean, I had a lot of head knowledge. I went to church, I volunteered, I worshiped my heart out, but there always seemed to be a barrier. And when I was able to slow down enough, and when I was at the end of myself and realized that I was enough, regardless of whether I saved another life, worked another day in the ER, made another dollar, I felt like divine inspiration really hit me. And every lesson in the program, I feel like, came out of like that guidance from the Lord, really. Because a lot of the techniques and tools that I developed on the fly working with people. Idea would come. I'm like, I have this idea. Let's try this. And that's how I came up with the way I processed through the trauma, for example. But it was allowing myself to get quiet enough where it was just me and God, and in the art really helped me quite a bit, because I have a hard time quieting myself. I always feel like I got to be doing something, and it forced me to slow down. Also, I recognize that there's a Bible verse, I think it's in Isaiah, where God's talking. He says, "Behold, I do a new thing. Do you not perceive it?" And that verse came back to me early on in this process. It's like, behold, I do a new thing. And I'm like, what is this new thing, Lord? And the new thing was not doing the same thing, expecting different results. And, for me, the same thing was pushing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, working hard, doing more responsibility, more, go, 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 go. And behold, I do a new thing. It's like, I have to stop doing life the way I'm doing it, because it's not working. And I just want to add, though, if you find yourself stuck doing the same thing, part of it is because it's, part of your template, part of the habituation that's occurred. But for me, I know a lot of my life choices and the way I was being in the world was a direct result of my trauma. Unknowingly, that trauma, that fight or flight, hyper alert, chronically stressed was my norm. I was primed to be in that place because of the trauma and the abuse and the constant fight or flight, fear. And so I made choices to work in the emergency department, take on extra shifts, be exposed to trauma, drama, death, dying because of the trauma. And now, although I still work in the ER, it's not because I'm reliving or recreating the trauma. It's a choice, and I'm no longer in that fight or flight, chronically triggered state of being. But I had to give myself permission to do things different and to accept that I'm enough, period, end of story. Because I didn't believe I was enough. I believed my worth was only the money I could make and the lives I could save. And a lot of that stemmed from my trauma because I was sex trafficked as a kid. And so I was all about earning money for someone else. That was my value. And fortunately, I've been able to uncouple that belief system. I don't believe that anymore. I'm enough just because, whether I make another penny or not.
Beautiful. Dr. Christy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. It's been a privilege and an honor. I've learned personally from you, and just hearing you speak today, it really is amazing to see where you've come from and where you are now, and the way that you're influencing people, and your humility in the moment to just say, God, I surrendered, I can be used. And the way that your heart and your wisdom together, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing so much and answering all of our questions. And it has been a privilege and an honor. And we would love to have you back another time. I'm sure we will have more questions, and we would love for you to come back and share with us even more. Tell us how everyone can find you.
Yeah. So if you know anybody, or you're curious yourself, it's www.doggone.depression.com. If you go on there, you can request the 5 tips to feeling better for free if you're curious.
Thank you for letting us learn with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your wonderful questions. You're right where you need to be. You're all right on time.
As always, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you like what you heard, I'd love to know. Leave us a review and share with a friend that could use an overcoming story so they can move closer to their purpose for their lives by renewing their mind the way God intended. Hey friends, thank you for listening. You're now done with step 1 of growing together at the Mindset School. Head over to themindsetschool.net and grab my free download where I share 5 tips when you can't hold it together anymore, and continue your journey to smiling authentically from the inside out.